Bondi's reopening.
And we're starting to move on from what has been one of the more depressing weeks in contemporary Australian history. Shops opened Friday with a pumped-up police and security presence.
And the bishop's spoken.
Mari Emanuel set aside the fire and brimstone for a moment to say he had forgiven the teenager who stabbed him. In his hospital bed statement, he called for calm and forgiveness and for his supporters to behave Christ-like, which they had, if Christ was into violent street rioting. As you can see, some of the bishop's supporters were so deeply Christian, they decided to attack the police in protest.
The week's been a big test for Elbow.
It was his first father of the nation moment. He got there eventually, but it was a wobbly start.
Last night, a 16-year-old who has been apprehended was accused of stabbing a bishop.
That was him addressing the country on Tuesday morning after the Wakely stabbing and ensuing riot, with the reassuring news that we shouldn't stab priests or have terrorism.
There is no place for violence in our community. There is no place for violent extremism.
Albanese was at pains to say there was no place for extremism anywhere in Australia, except Parliament.
That's my kind of party.
The stabbings made headlines around the world.
You know it's hectic when a crime cracks the American news cycle.
Australia is in shock following a second stabbing attack.
And now the investigation really starts.
Bishop Emanuel is recovering, the alleged perpetrators in custody. The question now is, did this child act of his own volition or was he radicalised?
I don't know what's worse.
Australia's spy boss, that's Mike Burgess, the guy who warned us we had a Chinese spy in Parliament but wouldn't tell us who it was, also warned us future terror attacks would most likely be by lone wolves like the kid at Wakefield. For some reason, Burgess has been removed from the Cabinet's National Security Committee.
That was an odd decision.
Maybe the Chinese spy made the call. Regardless of the motive, it seems a risky move by Albanese. The British government is being sued by survivors of the Ariana Grande concert bombing in 2017 because lawyers reckon MI5 wasn't on top of intelligence briefings.
The Wakefield stabber's in for some intense questioning.
There will be all sorts of deals on the table to get him to talk, but even if he does and he's convicted, he's still going to jail for a very long time. And if he gets into adult prison, he might have a special roommate.
It is open to the Senate to hold you in contempt, and that carries potential sanctions, including up to 6 months imprisonment for you.
That's Greens Senator Nick McKim threatening Woolworths boss Brad Banducci with time behind bars for not answering one of his questions.
Seemed a pretty straightforward query.
Also arguably the most boring economics question ever asked anywhere, ever.
The Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the... Anyone? The Great Depression.
Even more boring than that. McKim wanted Banducci to come clean on Woolworths profits as viewed through the boring prism of return on equity, what profit you generate for shareholders, instead of viewing it through the equally boring prism of return on investment, which is the return on all sources of capital, money invested by shareholders, and also any debt you have. Are you still with me?
Just get to the punchline.
If you borrow 400 grand to buy a house worth $500,000 and you sell it for 550 grand, your return on equity, that's equity being your 100k deposit, is 50%. But your return on investment being equity and that 400k in debt, is only 10%.
So very different numbers.
Senator McKim knew that the return on equity stat made Woolies look more profitable. He's a Greens MP from Tasmania and it's probably the only economic principle he actually understands. So he was running with it.
Do you know what your ROE was? Like, it's a simple, just yes or no. Do you know or not, Mr Banducci?
Running hard.
We're not interested in PR spin. We're not interested in you kind of bullshitting your way through this committee.
So why was Banducci dodging?
Because he thought it was a misleading metric. Regardless, he should have just coughed the figure up. It's no secret. It's in the Woolworths annual report every year. He should have coughed it up and moved on.
I think I'm done, guys.
Tanya Plibersek is due for a theatrical walkout.
I still don't know what the nature positive policy is. The good news is I now don't need to because apparently it's not happening.
Well, it's a policy designed to make the natural environment better off after
business has done its business in said environment. I got that much. But I don't understand how it would work in practice. Have you seen the size of an iron ore mine in the Pilbara? Or a Queensland coal mine? Or Olympic Dam in South Australia? There's not enough potting mix in the world, Tanya.
Why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
Australia's Environment Minister didn't want us to know the detail of Nature Positive until it was all ready to roll out.
Geez, that sounds vaguely familiar.
It's the right thing to do.
Having learnt nothing from The Voice, Tanya's minions started briefing industry about the plan, insisting they keep the information confidential. And guess what?
They didn't.
No, somebody walked out of the room and told a friend.
And they tell two friends, and they tell their friends, and so on, and so on, and so on.
And eventually someone told the West Australian Premier. Roger Cook, who like every West Australian Premier that came before him is a wholly owned subsidiary of the resources industry, quickly worked out that Nature Positive was royalty negative. So he had a quiet word in Tanya's ear.
Never gonna happen.
And now the laws are on the back burner.
Not according to the policy's architect. Former ACCC boss Graham Samuel is in denial about the government's U-turn, reckons rumours of Nature Positive's death are greatly exaggerated.
Just a flesh wound.
I'm Ben Harvey.